Hi everyone, good morning. My name is Celeste, and I have some thoughts today that I'd like to share with you. If you're a parent whose child just got diagnosed with autism, I'm sure there's a lot of emotions going on through your head. You may have a heavy heart, and that's very normal. In the midst of this roller coaster of emotions, there's another kind of dark cloud hovering over your head about ABA therapy. Okay? Is it the right choice for me? Is it the right option for me? Is ABA evil? Is ABA bad? Will ABA traumatize my child? Today I want to dive into these questions, and today I want to advocate my personal opinion. ABA is not evil. ABA can be a wonderful tool when used correctly by an informed and educated clinician. Okay. First of all, parents, I just want to acknowledge that if you are brand new and never started ABA therapy before, it's going to be very incredibly scary. It's scary. You're trusting people that don't know your child, right? People that don't know the ins and outs of your child. You're having to trust them with your child's well-being for how many hours a week. That can be terrifying. And especially when you're reading all these things online. And there's conflicting information. Like on one side, the internet says ABA is so helpful. Maybe on threads, parents are saying ABA has helped my child in many ways. I love ABA. I can't imagine navigating autism without it. And on the other side, there's a lot of information and validated opinions where people are saying, no, ABA is a monster. ABA traumatized me when I was a child. Or maybe coming from a parent's perspective, parents are saying ABA is evil. And yes, there are situations and accounts where the science is being used for evil things. Yeah. So both sides, both experiences are true. Okay. But I want to talk about why at its core, when implemented by a clinician that's trained well and educated, that ABA is good. Let's talk a little bit more about that. When I first started in the field over 13 years ago, I just had the basic training and kind of jumped in, not knowing what autism was, not knowing what ABA was, and I continued that way, learning from experience, but again, still lacking the core of compassionate care. Okay? I was trained to ignore the child when they're crying, right? Back in 2013, I was trained to ignore the child when they're crying, to not acknowledge them, don't pick them up, don't look at them, turn your back and wait till they stop crying. Wait until they emit a more appropriate behavior, then you can re-engage. Okay? I was trained that restraint can be implemented by anyone. And I had a trainer say this to me once. He said, and we're sitting, right? I'm still fairly new in the field at this point, a few years in, and the trainer is sitting, the trainer and us behavior therapists, there's like 5 or 6 of us sitting around the table, and he said, the child is the beta, you are the alpha. He said, when the child runs under the table to escape, you run under the table after them. And I just want to clarify that is, in my opinion, an evil, outdated view of ABA. Okay? And there is a new 2026 updated, ethical, compassionate, assent-based and neurodivergent affirming ABA that we should all be practicing today. I have my notes here, that's why I'm looking down. Like I said, when your clinician is trained and educated on trauma-informed care, that is an ABA that I believe in. That's a better, more ethical ABA. And let's talk more about what that looks like. I wrote down the 3 that I just mentioned. 3 criteria that I personally believe qualify as a better, ethical ABA. Number 1 is assent-based. Number 2 is compassionate. And number 3 is neurodivergent affirming. Let's break those down. Okay? And then before we do, I just want to acknowledge that, again, at the onset of my ABA journey, I wasn't trained or educated on these three components that make an ethical ABA. And it wasn't until years into my clinical journey where I learned these things and was trained on these things, and then it really came together. Like, it really created a clear picture. And now when I implement ABA, and today when I implement ABA, it's always compassionate, ethical, and dignified. I think it comes from a place of lacking experience and lacking education on what ABA is, because the therapy itself is always progressing, hopefully for the better, right? And I'm going to advocate that it is for the better, given the clinician is trained and educated. Okay, so let's break these down. Number 1 is assent-based. What does that mean? Assent sounds like consent. Assent is when the learner is demonstrating verbal or nonverbal behavioral cues that, yes, I do consent, I am a willing participant, and I voluntarily agree to participate in this therapy. And that might look like, so even for our learners who are not able to speak, that might look like leaning in, that might look like smiling, that might look like reaching for their therapist's hand. And when the learner withdraws their assent, it's the clinician's responsibility to back off. So if the learner pulls away, if the learner starts whining, if the learner gets up from the table and runs away, it's important that we as clinicians back off. And that is how we promote the utmost dignity and ethical care for our clients and their families. And it's important that we as clinicians train the therapist to be able to identify these both vocal and non-vocal cues and reinforce them. So that's 1, assent-based. Assent, that's your keyword for today. Number 2 is compassionate care. So again, like I mentioned earlier on in my journey, ABA really lacked compassion, and it should have never been that way. A compassionate ABA is one that should have always been. A compassionate ABA is one that when the child is crying, we comfort them, or we rub their back, or provide some affirming statements like, it's okay, buddy, I'm here for you, I hear you, I'm not going anywhere, I know this is hard, you can do it, right? That compassion. Again, not how I was trained 13 years ago, which is to turn your back on them. Like literally you would have to like turn your back and wait until the crying stops. Like, how terrifying is that? And at the time, I thought that was the right thing to do. I thought it made me a good clinician. That's what I was trained to do. And in our field, sometimes it's called extinction or planned ignoring, where you don't reinforce the crying or inappropriate behaviors. Very different than how I was trained a long time ago. So number 2 is compassionate care. And the last one is neurodivergent affirming. Again, the old way was frowning upon stimming. Stimming it just means a repetitive pattern of behavior. So common examples are like rocking, hand flapping, spinning, repetitive tapping. So the old ABA would say, nope, those behaviors are not socially appropriate. We need to teach our learners to be more socially acceptable. Okay? The new ABA in 2026 that I believe in and I personally implement is one that celebrates the unique differences of our learners and does not try to program or teach them to reduce those unique behaviors, given they're safe, reduce those unique behaviors that make them who they are. So a lot of the time our learners on the spectrum engage in hand flapping when they're happy. And if it's a happy stim, that's one we want to celebrate. That's not one that we want to focus on reducing. So if you're a parent who's on the verge of, making a decision, do I want ABA? Do I not want ABA? This is terrifying. I hear you. It can be terrifying. But I hope that your decision comes from an informed place, and whatever you decide, please know that that is the best decision for your child. Given that it comes from an informed place, that's going to be the best decision for you and your family. So again, thank you for listening to what I had to say. My name is Celeste. I'm a BCBA. I'm a board certified behavior analyst in the field of ABA therapy. Constantly learning, always growing. And thank you for watching, parents. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Are you thinking of starting ABA? Have you started ABA and you had a bad experience? Have you had ABA and you've had a good experience? I'd love to hear what that looks like for you. Thank you, parents. Keep showing up. Keep doing the work. You got this. Bye.